Ahoy! The New World Season 10 patch notes are finally here. They are incredibly long, there's a lot to talk about, we get right into it. I will skip some of the not so essential parts like lore and everything, but I will talk about everything that is coming out, including some stuff we talked about before, just in case this is your first time tuning in for this update. So we have our announcement here. Main things that I mentioned are the new zone, evolving endgame systems, a 10-player raid, and then also that we have a release date now on Monday the 13th of October. It will be free to play for all New World Eternum owners. That would mean you would have to own the expansion on PC, otherwise it wouldn't be New World Eternum according to their labeling. And it'll start its downtime at 5 AM PT or 12 PM UTC. And it will last approximately 2 hours, and that is also the time during which you can start downloading roughly. It won't be any preload. The new zone is Nighthaven, very spooky, very cool. Again, lore is not something we need to talk about here, but there is a little bit more information. They do say here that you'll need to do a little bit more exploration than in previous zones. Your journey will take you through uncharted underworld catacombs and complex castles and vertical structures. The quest tracker won't always tell you where to go or what to do, and the best rewards will only come to those who explore. So that's going to be very interesting, a bit similar to Brimstone, but I guess on a more significant level. And then we also have the Tier of Gaia as the continuing story, the same main story MSQ. And then next up we have our new game mode, the Catacombs. So this is going to allow you to explore the depth of a procedurally generated dungeon within some constraints, and you battle a wide variety of enemies and bosses, gaining unique power-ups for this mode, as well as collecting cursed resources, meaning if you lose the run you would lose the resources. That's how cursed normally works in New World. And currency as well, and you race to successfully exit and cleanse the treasures before time runs out, because there is a 30-minute time limit. While the difficulty of Catacombs is moderate at the start of the session, the challenge and reward is increased significantly with each time a boss is defeated. To counter this, players are able to acquire in-game or in-mode power-ups that enhance their stats and abilities. With each boss defeated, players must decide between pushing further into the Catacombs for an even greater reward, or safely making the exit before the time runs out. Failure to make a safe exit results in loss of the vast majority of the treasures collected, but only one player needs to exit safely to avoid this. The procedurally generated nature of the mode makes every run different. Each session presents the player with a uniquely generated catacomb constructed from a tile-based algorithm. The layout of the catacomb is revealed room by room as players explore. Enemies, encounters, bosses and hazards are different in every run. Each time you delve into the catacombs, you'll need to explore and chart the map and decide how you want to spend your limited time. Will you press forward or backtrack to get even more power-ups before advancing? And will you have enough time to extract with your spoils? They even pointed out, by the way, that you can split up and do different bosses at the same time and mechanics like that. In a successful Catacombs run, you'll earn 2 new currencies, sterlings and crowns. Sterlings are earned all over the dungeon, but crowns only come from bosses and only from the second one and beyond. To trade these currencies for Catacombs-specific rewards, you need to bring them to the Catacombs Delver near the inn in Nighthaven Settlement, Tula Rest Abbey. You can access the Catacombs from the Activity Finder. Next is our new 10-person raid, the Isle of Night. It is similar to Hive of the Gorgons, 3 new bosses, puzzles, new enemy types, and set pieces that you can get there now. This is going to be some of the hardest content in Season 10, and they say it demands players to gear up and coordinate to succeed. Overhauled endgame progression. Various systems here that are changed in various ways, starting with the very obvious one here. Level 70 is the new cap, and the gear score maximum is 800. And in PvP modes that currently scale gear up to 700, they will now scale to 775, like for example, Outpost Rush. Along with that, there's also a new gear modding system, the so-called Perk Charms. I've talked about these plenty now. Gear can have up to 4 empty sockets in which players can put perk modified called charms, which can come as gem, defensive, offensive, or skill. And the charms can be picked up fully refined, but more commonly we'll need to craft them with rare materials which drop from endgame content. And charms can be socketed and unsocketed, or I guess you destroy the existing one by socketing them, similar to how gems already work. So this is what that will look like. Set bonuses are another thing that is very similar in nature, that amplifies the gear that you are getting. So these are ultra rare sets, as they say, that will be earned from pinnacle endgame content like Isle of Night, Catacombs, and PvP track. They want to encourage players to mix and match these sets to achieve their desired build type, so they aren't all or nothing. Set bonuses will come in 2 types. Some set bonuses activate at 2 equipped pieces and then get better at 4 equipped pieces, so 2 and 4. And some only activate at 3 pieces and they get better at 5 pieces, so 3 and 5. And there's also an exception where one enraged set activates at 1 piece. And then there's a variety of combinations that are possible due to this from different sets, and you need to figure out for yourself what you want to do. And I think this skin, if I recall correctly, is a season pass skin as well. I think that was the one that was shown earlier. It looks a bit different here, but it looks probably because of the effects. Another new thing that is not that new is Umbral Shards, or Umbral Crystals now, which are returning. A resource that you can collect that allows you to upgrade your gear in gear score. So you no longer need to use the gypsum kiln or anything for that. That still has purposes, but not for the new upgrade system. You can just do that from your inventory here. You click on upgrade on an item, and then you can just pull the slider up and use your Umbral Crystals, which you can get from a variety of different weekly content. Mutations, raids, catacombs, elite chest, OPR, capture the flag, 33 arenas, PvP reward track, and there is a limit of 4,000 per week, and you also have a wallet cap of 4,000. So that will kind of limit it how much you can stash, but generally will probably be useful. Infix perks is another thing that is kind of its own unique perks that can be on items now and can often interact with the different set bonuses as well. So that's another story altogether that we've already looked at in detail as well. There will be attribute changes coming in so far that attributes are actually getting reduced by a little bit, and they will no longer be on gear, and instead most of your attribute points will just come from leveling. Your existing gear will be reworked slightly, so the attribute points on that get turned into a weaker perk, and that is pretty much going to be it for that gear, that, I guess, because it's basically missing half a slot due to this, with some exceptions obviously. But yeah, generally you can just assign your points from leveling now, and that's the points that you're getting, except for stat food, attribute food. And on top of that, they've made gear set storage loadouts now also save your current attribute loadout, so you don't need to constantly switch around, which makes things a lot more convenient. On the topic of perk design, they've done a complete sweep through the collection of perks, made some structural changes. Their goal is to make perk selection more conditional and thoughtful, to eliminate must-have perks that simply raise the critical combat numbers like damage, stamina, con reduction without some kind of meaningful drawback. And Hardy has been retired, and the cost of dodges has been reduced in return to 45 for light and medium and 50 for heavy. So you essentially still have Hardy as a functionality. If you're enjoying the video so far and you want to see all the other updates coming about this season in the next days and all the early info and tips on how to progress through it, then consider subscribing and clicking the bell. You get notified. If you want to get early trading tips just in time before the expansion still, then consider supporting me on Patreon. Now, next we have our new OPR map, the Tower of Calomel. This was already tested in-game. We could already try this briefly. I had some complaints about the map, but when I played it more, I will say I also started to enjoy it more. I still think there were some things that needed to be ironed out, but maybe they are by now anyways. It is basically a massive tower where there's like different levels outside of the tower, surrounding the tower. And most of the mobs, for example, are underneath. It's a very small map, which means there's constant fighting, which is nice. And there's also jump pads. And they say in this 20v20 battlefield, victory belongs to those who can master both heights and the depth of combat, referring to those layers. They say they have taken the feedback and bug reports from the Season 9 preview event and made many improvements to the map thanks to early playthroughs. They haven't specified yet what that is, but we will find out soon enough, I'm sure. This next change is just my favorite always in every game, I guess. There is now a we have full control over our gameplay HUD elements. Reposition, scale, even rotate any individual element on the HUD to your taste, whereas for PC players and console players. Absolutely love that. Huge fan of any game that allows you to do that, just for accessibility, but also for like visual clarity, seeing where things are happening. I hope that one day we can also get back the weapon swap system where you can see your active weapon wherever you want to, like instead of having them switch around constantly, because that's something I still want back. But this is such a huge improvement, which I think every game needs, and I'm very, very, very happy. Hopefully this works well, but yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Then we have our Capture the Flag Neutral Flag event. Join us for a weekend event featuring a game mode rules change for Capture the Flag. During this period, a neutral flag will spawn in the center of the map a few minutes into the match. Once the neutral flag is in play, it can be taken by either team and returned to the base to score points. Flag point values will also differ during this event, with team flag captures scoring more points than neutral flag captures. Please participate and let us know what you think. Very interesting, from October 24 to 27. This is probably worth giving a shot. I'd like to see it at least. Sounds like a fun new way to possibly rebalance that mode a little bit as well, because I know there's some complaints about that. Healers in PvP are getting some role balancing. Previously, they found matches based on a minimum and maximum numbers of players of healers per team, which could lead to longer queues and could result in lopsided matches. With role balancing, we can now compare the difference in healers per team and can form matches with either no healers at all or a guaranteed healer on each team in case of arenas, or in case of OPR and Capture the Flag, we will allow for a minimum of 1 healer per team with a max allowed difference of 1 healer between teams. These are the values that they start with, but they're monitoring matches to make changes based on what they're seeing in queue times and win rates. Unfortunately, this is already in place. There are some ways around this currently, and I hope they address that down the road as well, because as of now, it doesn't really work if you want to exploit it. Let's put it that way. All right, we are getting into combat and AI. So we've got new features and systems. We have the new perk systems. They've created a new perk system where new items have different breakdowns of perks on them than what they previously had. Attributes have been removed from items and are applied to leveling foods. The attribute perk slot has either been swapped out for a standard perk or replaced by a unique infix perk, a perk that is tied to the item and is similar to the unique perks on artifacts. Stat bonuses are a new type of perk that are activated when you have equipped a number of items to activate the stat bonus. This is basically specifying the same thing we already had above, so we're not going to go through that again. Weapon scaling. All weapons now have dual scaling, but varying amounts with slight adjustments to the scaling values for balance. Scaling percent values are now represented by letters, with S and then down to F tier, and the tier correlates with the power of the scaling. For example, S tier means scaling from 91% and higher, so not fully determined either, A from 81 and higher, and so on. Default scaling for each tier is the middle point in them, so all S tier weapons will start their scaling at 95%. This allows us to scale weapons a bit within the range of that tier without having a tier change. So we'll see for now, I guess, everything at the 95 mark here, then 85, 75, 65, 55, 45 for E tier, okay, and 35 for F. I haven't seen an F tier item yet. Healing from Life Staff, Flay, and Void Gauntlet will still only scale with focus. Attributes. Currently, each attribute has diminishing returns on them, making it so that more points you put into an attribute, the less powerful each point is. We have flattened this curve, so each point provides more power than before. Very, very important. A lot of people were concerned about the scaling nerfs to weapons, we included. This kind of offsets that. If you are getting more out of your points at the same time, then also the point reduction isn't that big of a deal. It just kind of changes how you can tweak points and where the impact comes in. So definitely keep this in mind with any balance changes. This alone means we don't really know how strong anything will be for a while, because this curve change may not sound like much to some people, but this is massive in itself. If you've tested around with these curves before, there is a pretty significant impact of that, of the diminishing returns. So yeah, no, this is the very important point. Also makes me wonder what would happen if somebody really just goes full damage now into 500 points into damage, what that would cause. They've reduced the total amount of attributes, as mentioned before, but they have increased the power of each attribute. So it's done so you can go all in on a damaging attribute, and you'll have to sacrifice some constitution to do so. So they don't want the bruiser everything playstyle thing. Attribute threshold bonuses have been updated to not be quite as powerful as they were before. They want the actual attributes to matter, not just the nodes in each attribute. This is going to be interesting. I'm particularly going to be looking at the int tree here. Removed the 300 con attribute bonus from attributes and pivoted over into an infix perk on rings. So I'm assuming this is going to be grit. Yeah, here it is. The 300 con grit on basic attack attribute bonus has been moved to an infix perk on rings with a slight damage trade-off added for balance. This ATB was arguably the most valuable attribute node, but having it as an attribute node eliminated some choice in attributes. Interesting, because I feel like 300 con isn't as popular as it used to be. Grit is very nice though. There are other ways to get grit now. There's a set for that and everything, so I think people will be fine on that front. But it is worth noting that, yeah, this might change a lot. We'll see what this perk is replaced by. Personally, I think other perks have been significantly more oppressive than that. Like, I think 25 strength is a very strong perk. I think all of the lower in-tier perks are very, very strong. So we'll see. We'll see how this holds up. Then we have a new hard rune, which is Phantom Blades. We have 3 different versions of that as usual. And the general effect is cast forth a set of swirling blade that spin in a circle, dealing ticks of 100% weapon damage to all targets within 4 meters of the blades. Last 7 seconds. Keep in mind, 100% weapon damage is referring to the hard runes damage here. The perks are Merciless Incision. Phantom Blades deals 20% increased damage to targets inflicted with ACC status effect. So stuns, root, slow, sluggish. I think this is all of them. I think this is the general perk for the 2nd tier. And then the 3rd tier, I think, are the other ones. Achilles Heel. Phantom Blades now slowly moves forward and inflicts sluggish, preventing them from dodging for 2 seconds or until they hit a target. Them being the targets that you hit. I think this effect in particular is very interesting if you're focusing healers, forcing them to fight back if they want to get away. Although I guess they could like flash through you or something. So you'd have to bait out a lot of things before you use this. At which point they might be dead anyways. Freeing Blades. Each hit of the blade will reduce all duration of limited CC on you by 10%. They actually did not change that. I thought they switched it around. But yeah, I'm not sure how good that will be as a hard rune, to be honest. But then if you're surrounded by a lot of enemies, and there doesn't seem to be a stack limit here, this would proc pretty quickly, right? This could be you being free of CC in 2 seconds. But it's also limited by you can only use this while you are not under the effect of a stun or a knockdown at least. So yeah, I'm not sure how good that was going to be. We'll see. Maybe for PvE. Mobile Destruction. Phantom Blades are now attached to you, however the radius is reduced to 1.5 meters and the damage is reduced to 70%. I think this one will be the fun one that people will go for the most just because it's fun. Perks. Added the Hardy Ring functionality to all players. We already had that. The stamina is now 100, but dodge cost has been reduced. And Hardy Onyx system items is now Gambled Energy, which grants 2.5 to 5% damage while stamina is not full. Kinda meh, in my opinion. They added a new slottable variant of item perks and also adjusted some values and functionalities for them. All new slottable and fixed perks will have the suffix 2 at the end, Roman 2, to differentiate them from the older perks. They reworked the new version of Weapon Mastery 2 perks that had general cooldown reduction and pivoted the functionality to be something else. Also adjusted some of the functionality of a variety of other mastery perks to lean into more preferred functionality. For Weapon Mastery, older versions of the Weapon Mastery perks that had cooldown reduction, they've reduced the values to incentivize using the new slottable Weapon Mastery perks on gear. I think this is basically talking about the cooldown reduction on earrings more than anything. It's a bit confusing because the Weapon Mastery perk hasn't really been explained that well there, but yeah, it should be it. They performed the stat squash, reduced a lot of the values in the old perk system to realign some of their values to allow for greater expansion of values via the new perks. In other words, old perks were nerfed and allowed for more creative and unique functionality and power to be added to the new infix perks and set bonuses. Gems. Adjusted conversion gems to no longer convert attributes and just convert damage types. This is important. So there's no more int or focus gems, but rather just an elemental damage conversion on all gems, and that's it. They want to lean into utilizing attributes more strategically now and make special unique items in the future with strategic scaling in order to allow for more creative builds and better tuning options on builds. So they're saying int great access now are going to be abyss and not int gems. This does limit build variety in some ways, because there were some interesting builds with just putting an int gem in another weapon, like SNS for example. But I do understand why they're doing it in the context of them also giving all weapons dual scaling, so there's a lot more other mix and match options, and I think combining that with int could have gotten pretty messy. So I see where this is coming from. Not entirely sure if I like this limitation, but it was also always weird that you could only do that with int and focus. Like there was no equivalent of a strength gem or something, so it was always a bit one-sided, and if you don't like int builds, then you didn't really use the system all too much. So yeah, pros and cons. They updated rune glass gems to use the highest tier of the base gem functionality, based off, and not the second highest like it used to. In other words, rune glassing always worth it now because it doesn't take away any mitigation, and I'm guessing also not any damage anymore on the weapon, based on how it's worded here at least. So everything is going to be rune glassed if you're going to the high end from now on. So yeah, interesting times in that regard. They adjusted the value of absorption gems as a part of a larger tuning pass, where they're reeling in some of the more extreme values that can be stacked across a variety of areas. Absorption, generally a very strong perk, so this is Opal and Onyx going down by 0.5%, and obviously the split gems that have similar absorption values as well. Artifacts, adjusted all perks that are on artifacts to fit in the new system, so they all have the tier 2 perks, which means artifacts are very nice to have early on. Pivoted artifacts to have a new version of the perk to either be slottable or a fixed perk that cannot be swapped out. I think every artifact is getting at least one slottable perk. Not entirely sure, but that's what it looked like so far. They removed the attribute portion of artifact perks outside of the plus extra X to all attributes functionality on the tuned leather pants and old crown. That is still present to keep those artifacts unique, although that is also nerfed. Trinkets, a very important thing, where I talked about that yesterday. They added effects that are now on all pieces of jewelry with a scaling with your gear score similar to like armor values on armor. All amulets will have up to 5% max HP based on gear score. All rings will have up to 10% base damage based on gear score. And all earrings will have up to 5% flat cooldown reduction based on gear score. Balance note, a lot of values tied to balance have been adjusted, and with changes to so many systems, there are far too many to note, so please re-examine the values across the board. Our intent with these changes is to create a wider build variety, more interesting play between different builds, and overall create a more interesting meta. We'll see how that plays out, because it also depends a lot on the perks and the set bonuses and everything else, so let's actually talk about all those. Alright, starting with the Enraged set. This is one we've already seen. Hitting a target within 30 meters grants self stacks of Enrage, increasing outgoing damage by 1%, and increasing attacker base damage by 0.5% per stack, so you take more damage. Note, some slower weapons can generate 2 rage at 2 perk hit due to the slower attack rate, so maybe a Warhammer. When you have 3 pieces equipped, increase the max Enrage stacks to 15. Heavy attacks generate an additional stack of Enrage. While Enrage and above 70% health, lose 5% of your max HP every second. So very risky. 5 equipped, increases max Enrage stacks to 25, increases the duration of Enrage by 50%. While Enrage, all attacks deal additional 8% damage while below 70% health. Again, very risky, probably going to be very favored in speedrunning and PvE. It's just a lot of bonus damage. In PvP, losing 30% of your health off the bat, kinda rough. And the infixes that come with them is Enraged Leech. While Enraged, all attacks gain 20% lifesteal while below 70% health. Very strong, but obviously below 70% health. I could see this for like a Void Blade build though. Just intentionally dropping a bit low, even to bait the enemy and just leeching it all back constantly. Could be very strong. Trenched Enrage. While Enrage, heavy attacks now consume 3 stacks, deal 20% more damage. This is spicy. Even more risky Greatsword playstyle. You already have the reduction from the extra damage taken from the offense side of things, and then you can stack this on top and deal more damage with your heavy attacks, but you have to be below 70%. Enraged Hunt. When exiting a dodge with more than 20 stamina and enrage, consume 4 stacks and trigger a 3.5 meter radius AoE that will pull in nearby enemies. That is the mini graph while on dodge that we already heard about. Enraged Refresh. Hitting a target with a light or heavy attack while at or above 15 stacks of enrage will consume 3 stacks, reduce the cooldown of all weapon abilities by 5% with a 1 second cooldown. I feel like you're constantly battling to keep up the stacks at that point. I guess it's kind of a ref move idea in a way. Again, likely very favored for PvE. Enraged Acceleration. While at or above 15% enrage, gain 8% haste. I'm sure that will be used by the people that are currently running all that haste at the same time, because it'll make you fast and it'll make even risky engages a bit less risky, I guess. Second Wind set. 2 equipped. While exhausted, you do 20% more base damage against enemies within 5 meters. Very weird. Like, exhausting, not something you want to aim for most of the time. Hitting an enemy within 5 meters will remove the slow from becoming exhausted by dodging. But it doesn't give you stamina back, it just removes the slow. And then with 4 pieces, while exhausted, attacks that hit enemies within 5 meters have 10% lifesteal and grant 3% empower stacks that will last for 5 seconds when exiting the exhaust state with a max of 5 stacks. I mean, 50% lifesteal is kind of nice to have if you can stack that quickly. If you can do like exhaust yourself and do flamethrower and every hit counts, then you instantly have 50% lifesteal on flamethrower and a 15% empower. So maybe there's a use case there. That's what I'm thinking. But I still think it's kind of weird that you would want to exhaust yourself for that. And the other effects here are Relentless Second Wind. While exhausted, gain uninterruptible, which is nice. It's basically a headship berserk, grit, but a bit better. And enervated accuracy. While under 50% stamina, gain 50% crit chance. Only really matters if crit is more relevant in PvP in general. Cleansing Second Wind. Cleanse slows and roots on yourself if you become exhausted by dodging. This one I think could be somewhat interesting. I think there is room for that. I don't know if it's just a cleanse in a very second or after, but if it's like a very brief cleanse frame, could be helpful. We'll see. And then Speed Recovery. Gain a 10% haste for 4 seconds after exiting the exhausted state. This could be kind of nice. I think Speed Recovery of those is the most interesting one. Like, if you mess up and you get exhausted and then you get your stamina back, you also get hasted to maybe get out of a bad situation if you're getting chased for a long time. Protector's Blessing. 2 equipped. When applying a heal to a target above 50% health, gain a stack of Protector's Blessing with a cooldown of 2 seconds and 5 stacks max. While at max stacks, you're inflicted with 7% rend, and healing an ally that has more than 50% health will add 15% fortify for 5 seconds. Very interesting. So you kind of self-rending and then taking it away again with the fortify. As long as you heal, well, as long as you keep people at high health, really. And 4 equipped, gain 3% base damage bonus per stack. While at max stacks, if you heal a target that is below 50% health, the stacks are consumed and they heal for 10% of the weapon damage every second for 5 seconds. Kinda nice, but I'm not entirely sure based on the wording here if this heals yourself or the person that you're healing. The bonus damage is also confusing, but I guess that does actually scale your healing. If it counts as weapon damage, I think. It's been a while. Maybe, don't quote me on that. But yeah, I'm not sure if this set is going to be the most favorite one, because there is another healer set, I think, which seemed very, very strong in comparison, but interesting mechanic. Then we have the Overcharge set, 3 equipped. Hitting an enemy within 5 meters or killing an enemy grants an Overcharge stack, 5 second cooldown. Each stack increases your base damage by 5% and Affliction resistance by 10%. Affliction is the PvE ones usually, so it seems to be a PvE set based on that. You're also inflicted with 4% rend per stack in return. Getting hit removes all stacks. I'm thinking maybe this Affliction thing will be relevant for Catacombs. And 3 stacks maximum. I think the fact that this has a 5 second cooldown though and getting hit removes all stacks means this is a very easy to lose buff. At 5 equipped, max overcharge stacks increase to 5. Vortex stacks also increase stamina regen by 5% now. I would have thought they reduced the getting hit, the modifier here. But yeah, very good positioning in PvE required, and I think you get some use out of that. Next up, we have the elementally charged set. Set bonus at 2, magical weapon abilities do 7% less base damage, but they store a charge in that weapon's element for 20 seconds. Activating an ability of a non-magical weapon will consume the charge and add 10% bonus damage, base damage of that element to that weapon's attacks for 10 seconds. Still a very interesting mix that I'm not quite sure how it'll be used effectively yet, especially now that there are no int gems, because I feel like this would have worked well with int gems, but now most other weapons don't scale highly enough with int, I think. Like Great Axe, for example, doesn't scale high with int. And at 4 equipped, you can store now up to 2 charges of each element, while the 2 charges gain 10% resistance to damage of that element. Infixes. Elemental Hunger. While you have no elemental charges, you take 5% less elemental damage. Elemental Mana Battery. For each stored elemental charge, gain 20% mana rate. Elementally Energized. While consuming an elemental charge by using a non-magic ability, gain 20% stamina regen for 10 seconds. This, I think, is not that bad. Sounds interesting, but it's like a regen, not a flat value as usual. Elemental Rush. When consuming an elemental charge by using a non-magic weapon ability, gain 10% haste for 5 seconds. This also consumes 30 stamina. Sounds terrible, to be honest. 10% haste, but 30% stamina, 30 stamina. I don't want that. Whenever I hit someone, I lose 30 stamina. No. Not for me. Stifling set. Set bonus. 2 equipped. Hitting an enemy with an attack while all your active weapon abilities are on cooldown silences your target for 2 seconds and yourself for 1 second. Can occur once every 5 seconds. At 4 equipped, while silenced, do 10% more base damage with basic attacks, and hitting a target will reduce the ability cooldown by 5 seconds. This is kind of the Crescent Wave 1 ability Moonstone build so far, where you just don't want to have abilities in the first place so you can proc this more. The perks, the infixes here are Stifling Resolve, gain 10% damage absorbed while silenced, obviously very nice. Stifling Danger, damage is increased by 5% when hitting a silenced target, also very nice. Stifling Evasion, exiting a dodge while silenced will trigger an AoE that damages nearby targets, which is also kind of interesting, I guess. I don't know how much damage it's going to be. Stifling Energy, gain 50% increased stamina regen while silenced. This, I think, is pretty nice. It is just for 1 second that you're silenced, but still, like, an increased stamina regen sounds pretty good. It depends on how often you can really apply it, though. That's the shortage on that set. Tenacity set bonus. 2 equipped pieces. Get grit for 2 seconds after being staggered. However, take 5% more damage while grit is active. It's a bit annoying that it's after you're getting staggered, so you're actually not getting the grid for the staggered, from what it sounds like. But this damage here, I'll get to that in a second. Because at 4 equipped, successful light attacks apply grid for 3 seconds with a 6-second cooldown. And while grid is active, you gain 5% lifesteal. Now keep in mind, there will also apparently be that ring that gives you grid on the wind-up attacks as well. And one of the things, like with this one here, is that with this mechanic, you are getting grid quite often. You have a lot of grid uptime, and due to that, it might be worth investing into Grid Ward, which would then kind of offset this damage taken increase. So basically, you just have to have 2 pieces of Grid Ward to offset this trade-off, and due to the uptime on the grid, it should be worth it. So realistically, this value may look bad and might not be quite as bad. So keep that in mind. Tenacity penetration. Armor penetration is increased by 10% when hitting targets with grit. I'm not sure if this means while you have grit. I'm assuming it means when you have grit, not when they have grit. But we'll see about that. Tenacity critical. Critical chance is increased by 10% while grit is active. Also nice if crit is good in any way. Tenacity rebound. Enemies receive 5% damage when they hit you with a melee attack while grit is active. Kinda nice. 5% is pretty low though. Might be nice in like wars, maybe? I'm not sure if a lot of people have this perk. Tenacity recovery. Incoming heals increase 10% while grid is active. I feel like that is big in wars. So we'll see. I think this grid set should be like very nice. It's meant as a bruiser set, and I can totally see it having value as that. And then there is the focus set. 2 pieces equipped, 15% increased healing on targets outside of Sacred Ground or Beacon, which is massive, just free healing for 15% more. And at 4 pieces, healing increased by 15% and cooldown reduced by 5% on heal after holding a weapon for 10 seconds. So if you're just sitting on your life staff, extremely good. Also means forcing a healer off the life staff. Very, very strong. A very good reduction through that now. And disease getting a bit weaker once again. But yeah, I think this could be a very highly contested tier based on based on how good the perks are. I think, honestly, this set is way less conditional than any of the others. And I would probably, if I was a healer, this is what I would absolutely go for. Whereas the other sets are all with more trade-offs. Additional infix perks here are Focus Cleanse. Self-casting Light's Embrace will cleanse player and make them immune to debuffs for 2 seconds. Requires 300 focus, 15-second cooldown. Immune to debuffs for 2 seconds is pretty big if you're getting targeted. If you can get the cast off. Focus Determination, immune to crowd control debuffs for 1 second and 3 seconds with 300 focus after a healing cast is interrupted. A 10 seconds cooldown. Also massive in my opinion. Focused Fortify, healing targets under 50% with burst heals will receive a 145% Fortify for 5 seconds. 15-second cooldown. Absolutely insane. I actually don't know if you can stack infixes. I think you might be able to. Not sure, but either way, these two, you could just, if you can stack them, why would you not? But you might be limited in that. I'm not sure. And Focus Speed, healing a target outside of a Sacred Ground or Beacon grants 10% haste for 4 seconds with an 8 seconds cooldown. Kind of funny how they wanted to reduce haste a lot, and now they're giving a haste option to pocket healers. But oh well, it is what it is, and there's so many new haste, but we'll see how that plays out. I'm not sure how they've tweaked haste overall. And there's a bunch of standalone infixes as well that are not tied to a specific set. Critical Storm. Once every 0.5 seconds when you crit a target, gain a stack of Storm Charge on self, lasting 10 seconds. At 6 Storm Charges, hitting a target with an ability will consume all of the charges and trigger a Bolt of Lightning, dealing 100% additional damage. Like I said, this is very much a Void Blade thing, which could be nice for them. Thwarting Stun. Whenever you hit a target with active grid or uninterruptible, deal 5% increased damage and gain a stack of Thwart. Merely heavy attacks, while at 10 stacks, consume all stacks and inflict a 1 second stun on the target, with a 10-second cooldown on the stun application. I think this is very interesting, particularly like when thinking about this more. I think this is very interesting for a great sword trading into a hatchet. Unstoppable. Gain grid on melee heavy attacks and during the light melee attack startups. However, take 5% increased base damage from enemy attacks while grid is active. This is similar to the other grid perk that we talked about above. Problem is, if you're stacking both of these, then you are effectively taking 10% more damage while grid is active, which is a bit of a problem, I would say. I guess Warhammer can kind of offset that because it gets a lot of extra mitigation anyways. And again, Grid Ward can do the rest, but at that point you're investing all of the Grid Ward just to offset your own reduction. Alternating Enchantment. Hitting a basic attack will increase the base damage of the next ability within 5 seconds by Y%, and hitting an ability will increase the base damage of the next basic attack for 5 seconds by Y%. Why don't say that well values here? I've tested Alternating Enchantment on live recently, and I can make a video about that, and if the values are similar, we'll see how effective this will really be. Yeah, the findings that I had were not what I was hoping for, at least. Close quarters, light and heavy attacks with ranged weapons deal within 10 meters, deal 20% more damage, but you also receive 5% increased attacker base damage. I'm thinking blunderbuss here more than anything, because it's kind of a ranged weapon that you use half in melee range anyway, and I don't know, like, this is concerning. 20% more damage on the blunderbuss. I don't know if this is actually base damage. Wild. Like, yeah, you take 5% more damage, but the enemy is blown up by your combo before they even know what happened. So, yeah, the downside is if you're running with blunderbuss and you're running another weapon as melee weapon, you're basically constantly taking extra damage while on melee, unless it's turned off when you're not on a ranged weapon. So that is, I think, a significant trade-off. Chain Lightning, once every 10 seconds, damaging enemies with a magic weapon ability will cast Chain Lightning that hits up to 5 unique targets and deals 50% of your weapon damage. However, when triggered, you take 30% lightning damage. Between the long cooldown and the self-damage, I am not the biggest fan. Empowering Heal. Healing an ally gives you a stackable buff that increases your damage dealt by 1% for 10 seconds with max of 20 stacks. I guess this is like Vengeance Reloaded or something. Adrenaline Burst. When your health drops below 50%, your critical chance is increased by 18%. A lot of crit perks, not sure if they're going to be effective yet. Shredding Backstabs. Backstabs penetrate 40% of your target's armor, but your critical hits deal 20% less damage. I think this will likely be worth it for a lot of weapons that don't have the highest crit multiplier. Once again, I'm immediately thinking of Greatsword. Not a great crit weapon at all in terms of damage, but 40%? That's a lot. That is a lot. So yeah, keep an eye out for this. Modder, Boom. Okay, now I know how to read that. Modder, Boom. Mortar Charge now only fires one canister. It fires immediately and will bounce before exploding if it does not hit an enemy. When this canister explodes, it deals 130 weapon damage in a 5-meter area. Very interesting, because obviously Mortar Charge, very clunky ability. Don't know how it's going to feel in terms of animation, because at the moment that's like a big part of the clunkiness. If you can fire this off quickly, could be nice, could be interesting, could be a fun perk that really overhauls an ability that kind of needs it. Maybe this is kind of a test run for changing the ability as a whole. Exerted Spin. Whirlwind no longer needs to hit targets to continue spins. It can spin up to 12 times. When the spins end, it consumes all of your stamina and you become exhausted. So this is Tempest Fury for people that are unable to find a group that's clearing Sandworm, I guess. I think this is cool, but I don't think losing all of your stamina is worth it for a couple extra spins. No. I think a big deal with like the whole whirlwind thing is also that it's such a good escape and it allows you to get away so far. That would go out the window if you get exhausted. Question is, what happens if you dodge out of the animation just before the last spin? Because you now have this post-exhaust animation on whirlwind anyway, and if you can just skip the exhausted part by dodging, suddenly this becomes a much better perk for people that can time it. Revive. Casting Life's Embrace on a downed player will revive them. Requires 300 focus, 45 seconds cooldown. Not even that long of a cooldown for a res that doesn't require you to walk up and res. A lot of people are wondering what this means for PvP. I would assume not much. I would assume that since revives have effectively been removed from most PvP modes, with the exception of open world, would probably not see that much impact from it. But yeah, very interesting. Don't know how it'll play out in specific situations, where it'll allow you to cast it. But I do like the concept. I'm not sure how well it will work, but I like the concept. Poison Affinity. Deal 15% more damage to poisoned enemies. This seems crazy, especially if you can stack it with the existing artifacts, actually. I think both a bow and a spear, technically. They work a little bit differently. But yeah, no, this is a lot of extra damage. Poison being very easy to apply. You can get this with almost anyone by just running a nature rune glass, because that counts as poison, I think. Not 100% sure, but otherwise I guess bile or something. Yeah, no, this is another very interesting one. Cleansing Block. Blocking attack removes 1 debuff, 3 seconds cooldown. We've seen that before on Artifact. I think this is a very nice perk to have, especially if it's not tied to, I think it's tied to Kite Shield. So it's a Michael maybe. Yeah, either way, that not being tied to that, very nice. On the slottable perks, we have a lot of tier 2 perks here now. Defensive slots. I'm not going to compare all of them to the old perks because I don't have the numbers top of my head. Might do that in a future video. But we'll see here. Freedom 2. Reduce the base duration of slow stun and root by 7.85 to 10%. I think I'm just going to give you the final values here. We're going to just talk about the highest value, which would always be the 800 gear score value, with the exception of ones that obviously have higher values on the weapon. So let's just say 10%. You can read the other values if you want to see them. Still, 5 pieces of freedom, 50% CC reduction. Vigor, reduce the base duration of burn, bleed, and poison to 10% as well. So Vigor alone won't be enough to get that down to 0. I think Vigor particularly was high, and I think Invigorated too. So we'll see what happens there. We have the same thing with Invigorated to reduce the base duration of Weaken, Disease, Exhaust, and Rend by 10%. Hasted Vigor, potency of incoming damage over time effects reduced by 9% per armor piece with this perk, and taking a hit while inflicted with a dot will grant 9% haste for 5 seconds. I think having Hasted Vigor is absolutely worth it, just for the haste. Unless you want to avoid the... Well, we'll see what happens to that perk. Might be changed anyways. Physical Aversion, receive 3.6% less damage from ranged physical attacks. Elemental Aversion, receive 3% less damage from ranged elemental attacks. Did I say physical before? Physical for physical aversion, obviously. Shirking heals 2. Dodging an attack heals up to 200 health and 1.2% of your max health. Each armor piece adds a stack trigger once every 7 seconds. Yeah, I think this is not that great. I'll have to look into that. Fortify 2. Fortify, you apply lasts 10% longer, and this stacks up to 5 times, I think. I think everything that stacks should be 5 times. So 50% longer, not bad for certain builds. Sacred, 6.5% outgoing healing efficiency. Doesn't say stacks here. I'm thinking it does. I'm thinking most of these stack, but maybe this one doesn't because it would be a crazy amount of extra healing. Divine 2, health from a non-consumable life-stealing... 5.5% health from a non-consumable or life-stealing healing sources. Again, stacking now. Alchemist Reprieve, improve the healing from potions by 7%. Stacks. Anointed Lifesteal, 7% increased healing from Lifesteal. Also stacks. Grit Ward 2. This is going to be interesting now. 2.2% damage taken reduction while under the effects of grit. So yeah, you would barely... If you have all the grit perks that we talked about before, and you are gritting, you have 5 grit ward, you would take 1% less damage from grit, because that's all you get in terms of offsetting all these other effects with that. Enchanted Ward 2. This is a big one because it's the big PvE one. 2% damage taken reduction from light and heavy attacks. I was expecting that Enchanted Ward would get nerfed just because it is such an overbearing perk in general. I am actually going to look up the current value. I don't know exactly from the top of my head how much it is. For everything else, I'm like, yeah, we're not going to look at that detail, but yeah, it is a lot more. It is currently 4%, so it's halved. I'm not shocked. This might really shake up the PvE meta. We'll see if it'll still be used. And it'll also just generally mean there's a lot more perks that'll be considered. We have Potent Vivacity 2, increase the potency of all energy status effects on you by 15%. And Potent Energy, decrease the potency of all exhaust effects on you by 15%. Purifying Toast 2, when you drink a survival potion, lose 1 debuff. Interesting because it means you can slot this anywhere now, which I think makes it kind of worth it. Especially because it's on a survival potion now. It's not just a regen potion. It's like anytime you drink a pot, you lose a debuff. Like, why would you not do that, really? Keenly Fortify 2, gain 90% Fortify for 5 seconds on a critical hit. I think this is actually one of the values that's staying higher. With a 7-second cooldown, but with all the crit perks that are going around now, Keenly Fortified. On an armor slot, like, it's not a big sacrifice. Like, I don't see why you wouldn't, honestly. That's a lot of extra mitigation for a single point if you have any crit chance or you're just stabbing people in the back. Yeah. Wellness, increase max health by up to 2%. So I think Enchanted Ward probably still more appealing than Wellness at first glance, just due to the way that mitigations are calculated and everything, but that is something we'll have to look into in more detail, obviously. There are things that health saves you from enchanted ward doesn't, or wellness, no, doesn't. I wonder if they renamed wellness just because health had such a bad rep, because I think with a change, health wouldn't be on amulets anymore anyways. Not sure, but sounds funny, wellness. And that brings us to the offense slots. I'm just gonna rapid fire these. Flame harnessing and all other elemental harnessing are now up to 2.5% damage. This also includes the physical harnessing ones. Enchanted 2. Light and heavy attacks deal 2.3% more damage. And this stacks. You can put more of this on gear. You actually get more extra damage from Enchanted than you get reduction from Enchanted Ward. Could be also interesting for PvE. Skilled enchantment. Abilities deal up to 1.5% more damage. Equally interesting for some playstyles. And keep in mind, you can still rune glass and stuff on top of that. So there's a lot that can be added together for a lot of extra damage. Vicious. Up to 3% extra critical damage. This is interesting. I didn't think about this before. We actually should look at this for a second. Vicious, obviously, is somewhat limited in its purpose because it's only one piece at the moment on weapon. 7.3 extra damage. This is probably stackable. As long as you have offense slots, you can probably stack that. That is 15% extra crit damage, and that explains all the crit perks, I think. Because I think this allows you to push past crit mitigation, past base mitigation, with a lot of weapons. We'll also have to see how the con perk is adjusted on top of that. So keep this in mind. There might actually be a crit meter upon us, which might have explained that 40% backstab thing as well, if crit is going to be that strong. But then again, you also have to slot 5 vicious, so it's a lot of offense slots going for that, which could be worth it, honestly. Interesting. And then keen, also a 4% crit chance. Again, you can slot this on multiple pieces, so you could just run a keen vicious set. Vorpal, 4% headshot damage, also same idea. Rogue, 3.6% more backstab damage. This is weird because if vicious still counts, like if a critical is still a backstab, if that's still applied the same way, then I don't see why you would run rogue at all, unless this backstab damage here, because it's not technically counted as crit damage but as backstab damage, it might work differently in combination with the reduction that we talked about before from the penetrating perk. So whereas maybe like stacking vicious wouldn't even give you an increase anyways, because the reduction would just take it away immediately based on that perk, this might not have that downside. It might just add to your backstab damage regardless, in which case you would combine them. That's going to be one expensive test to do, I guess, but we'll see. Penetrating backstab 2, this might be the better option, to be honest. Backstab penetrate up to 8% of a player's armor. Again, stacking? Question mark? That could be a lot. If you can actually stack 5 of these, that would be terrifying. Get your dagger set ready, I guess. Penetrating headshot. Headshots penetrate up to 7% of a player's armor. Poisoning 2. Poisoning apply lasts 15% longer. Also, by the way, I think you can combine all of these. If you get enough offensive slots on an item, you could go keen, vicious, rogue, pen backstab at once. Technically, if you had 4 offense slots, which would be hilarious, but just saying, technically that should be possible. Insane RNG if you get that, but funny. Okay, back to the other packs. Poisoning, like all of the dots have the same effect. Everything you apply lasts 15% longer for poisoning, bloodletting, burning, and also for the CCs and for crippling, enfeebling. That's interesting. And infected. Keep these 2 in mind as well. So if you stack these, you get a lot of extra slow and a lot of extra weaken duration, slow duration, weaken duration, or disease duration even. That might be spicy for some builds. I think builds will look a lot more unique and specialized based on how much you can do with them now. Could be interesting. Empowered lasts up to 12% longer on you. That's alright. But also stackable again, so 60% if it's 5 stacks. Alacrity, haste lasts 12% longer. Leeching, you gain 4% of your damage's health. So 20% leeching if stackable. Yeah. I think that's still fine. Combine it with a blood drinker. Almost at cap. Yeah, I think it's good. Keenly jagged. Inflict bleed on critical hit, dealing 9% weapon damage per second for 6 seconds. Hold on. I'm assuming that all these perks are stackable. I wonder if this one is. Because that would be interesting. If you could stack that, 45% weapon damage. I'm gonna stop for a second and look at current keenly jagged. Yeah, it deals 10% at the moment. This is barely any different. I'm kind of thinking this might not be stackable. Again, I'm sure some of these will. I don't know which ones will or won't. It's a bit unclear to me. Because this is a value that sounds like stackable. This is a value... this is a value that sounds stackable. This is a value that doesn't sound stackable based on how things are currently going, unless they just want to make bleed builds insane. Yeah, let's see. Especially if you like stack that with bloodletting as well. It's just insane overbleed. Keenly empowered. Gain 30% empower for 5 seconds on a critical hit. I'm gonna assume that one's not stackable. Because otherwise that would be a ridiculous amount of empower. Yeah, but we'll see. I don't know. This is a bit confusing to me because, I mean, Keen, Vicious seem like such stackable perks with the values they're offering. Or the damage perks. And then the ones down here really don't. Maybe it's just the keenly ones that are different. Alright. Skill slots. This is basically all of our weapon perks. Again, we're not going to compare them. With these, I think the values give you both one for on armor and on weapon. Based on the scalings that they're showing us. I don't think this is purely a level scaling. Not 100% sure though. Crippling Feral Rush. When Feral Rush hits, well, hatchet first, right? Cause a 20 to 40% slow for 3 seconds and deal 12 to 24% more damage. Keen Berserk. Gain 8 to 16 critical chance, 8 to 16 more crit damage while Berserk is active. Again, you can stack that with a new Vicious. Compounding Torrent. Raging Torrent deals 3.6% increased damage, or base damage, per successful attack against the target. Pretty nice. 4 stacks. Empowering Rending Throw. Hatchet throws deal 20 to 40% more damage against rending throw targets. Still very strong. Prolonged Distancing Throw. Hitting a target while social distancing's quick power haste is active will extend the duration of slows on the target by 7 to 14%, increase the base damage of attacks by 3.5 to 7%. So another damage increase on top of the rending throw, but you're losing the very nice cooldown reduction perk that you used to have before. So trade-offs, I guess. Exhausting Infected Throw. Direct hits with Infected Throw cause exhaustion, reducing the target's stamina regeneration by 25 to 50% for 7 seconds. Kind of like it was, I guess. But higher value, maybe? Yeah. And next up, we have Warhammer. If the scrolling will cooperate. Empowering Armor Breaker. If Armor Breaker breaks a target, the next attack deals, for 5 seconds, deals plus 20 to 40% damage. Crippling... still very limited, by the way. Crippling Mighty Gavel. Mighty Gavel inflicts an 8 to 60% slow for 7 seconds, and you always deal 2.5 to 5% more damage against slowed targets. Okay, I'm going to start just reading out the max values again because it's too much otherwise. Yeah, okay. Mighty Gavel with the slow. So, still don't know with Mighty Gavel, with the animation and everything, but maybe we'll get there one day. Penetrating Wrecking Ball. Wrecking Ball now penetrates up to 36% of the target's armor, but Wrecking Ball itself is so clunky at the moment. Hopefully we get to that later. Sundering Shockwave inflicts rend, reducing the target's armor by 16% for 8 seconds. Leeching Clear Out. No more Sundering Clear Out. No, they're all Sundering. Heal for 30% of the crit damage dealt by the damage dealt by Clear Out. Not that great, in my opinion, for most builds. And taking away the second Sundering, relevant for PvE, maybe makes the hammer less appealing in that regard. Sundering Destiny. Oh no, never mind, sorry. It's been moved. Path of Destiny now inflicts rend, reducing the target's armor by 10 to 20% for 6 seconds. So slightly shorter than Shockwave, but higher rend value. That's crazy. Like, consider Wars, a path going through the point. I kind of unslotted Path of Destiny for the most part because it felt like it's more fun things to use, but this, very strong. Very, very strong. So, might be Sundering Path of Destiny on weapon now, possibly. Musket, crippling powder burn. Targets hit with powder burn are slowed by 20% for 8 seconds. Plagued power shot. Power shot inflicts 16% disease for 8 seconds. Hitting and inflicted with this disease will increase the base damage dealt, or taken probably by them, by 10%. Very spicy. Okay, running power shot that way now. Is that what's gonna happen? Okay. I'm not sure if I like this because power shot already kind of a staple. I think does enough by itself. Oh, let's see. I think it was refreshing before. I don't know. Empowering shooter stance. Hitting a target while shooter stance grants one power, increasing damage by 40% for 10 seconds. Effect is removed if the stance is exited with a max of 4 stacks. Stopping power 2. Deal 20% more damage to targets inflicted by stopping powers, slow and exhaust buffs. Ooh, yeah, okay. I don't think that's how it currently works. Pretty sure that's something else. It's been a while, sorry Musket Gang, but yeah, no, I'm pretty sure that's not what we previously that. Kind of think that might be very interesting. Accelerating traps. 60% movement speed up for 5 seconds after applying a trap, and traps now apply bleed for 20% weapon damage for 3 seconds. Much shorter, much lower, especially compared to the Kenny Jag. Mending sticky bombs. Every hit of sticky bomb heals you for 30% of the damage dealt. I think Musket's looking pretty interesting with these perk changes. Spear. Bleeding sweep. Sweeps coup de grace now applies bleed for 80% of weapon damage for 4 seconds. Pretty short. Sundering Javelin inflicts rend to targets above 50% health, reducing the target's armor by 34% for 7 seconds. Leeching Cyclone. Cyclone hits heal you for 26% of the weapon damage, max 3 targets. That used to be more. Compounding Perforate. That's new, no more Fortifying Perforate. Compounding Perforate hits deal 12% increased base damage per successful attack against the target with a max of 2 stacks. Okay. Nice in PvE. Not that great in PvP. Because most of the time in PvP I find you are only hitting 2 hits. And it's nice to get the 2 the fortifies from it. Whereas in this case you're just gonna get the base damage increase for the next hit, and maybe the next hit lands, and then afterwards the third one is probably not gonna land, so you're just getting half the increase, I guess. Not a fan of that. I guess they wanted to get rid of some of the fortify on it. It's fine, we can just run keenly fortified on the armor now. Enfeebling Skewer. Skewer hits apply weaken, reducing the target's damage by up to 32% for 8 seconds. That's still pretty strong. Keen Vault Kick. Vault Kick increases critical chance by 32% for 7 seconds, but will Vault Kick see changes? That's the question. It will actually be usable outside of PvE. Bow. Enfeebling Poison Shot. Poison Shot applies a weaken, reducing the target's damage by 26% for 8 seconds. Energizing Evade Shot. Hitting an enemy with Evade Shot grants 18 stamina and increases stamina regen by 24% for 4 seconds. Lasting Rain of Arrows. Slow and bleed lasts 34% longer, and Rain of Arrows deals 18% more damage to targets 15 meters or further away. Rapid Shot. 36% armor penetration of all rapid shot attacks. Yeah, okay. Shattering Penetrating Shot. I think that might be new. Penetrating Shot deals 34% increased stamina damage to blocking targets and deals 30% increased damage to targets with active grid. Oh, ouch. With all the new grid coming out, the guys that already take 5% more damage, they will now take another 30% on top of that. Empowering Explosive Arrow. Explosive Arrow grants a power, increasing damage by 40% for 4 seconds or until the next hit. Rapier. I am sure we're going to see some changes here. We usually do. King Tondo. 20% critical chance against targets affected by Tondo's bleed. If this perk is on a weapon, Tondo also inflicts 20% weaken for 8 seconds. Question once again, does this still apply for Flurry? Deadly Flourish. Flourish deals 70% base damage and will cause your next attack to have 100% crit chance. Leeching Flurry. Deal for 40% of the damage dealt by Flurry. Gain 30% damage reduction on for 4 seconds on Flurry use. Oh, there we go. No more iframes. Damage reduction, not nearly as good in comparison. And that is gonna be some unlearning for a lot of people that have gotten very used to those iframes. Alright, okay. Interesting, interesting. It is not fortify, by the way, it's damage reduction. Which in some, okay, yeah, okay. Damage reduction for 4 seconds. You know what, when I think about that, in some situations that could be pretty good. I'm thinking in PvP, where, yeah, the iframe is also nice, but like, if you're playing it offensively, you're not using the iframe that much because you're still going to use your flurry to attack. And, like, you can still use it, don't get me wrong, but I think having 30% damage reduction, if it applies like gems, basically, with like absorption, that could be quite a lot in a fight, right? That's quite a long duration in a fight to have that much damage duration for. Maybe a new use case. Interesting. Sundering Riposte. Riposte inflicts rend, reducing target's armor by 30% for 8 seconds. Combo the Sundering Riposte Leeching Flurry for them taking all the damage and you taking none of it. Omnidirectional Evade. 14% damage for 2 seconds until the next hit after using an evade. Diago upgrade is applied when evading in any direction. Rogue Flesh. Hitting an enemy in the back with flesh deals 40% increased base damage. Very spicy with all the other backstab stuff that is coming out. Life Staff. I'm not going to notice the change of CMI. Unstoppable Divine Embrace. When Divine Embrace hits an ally above 70%, that ally gains grid for 1.5 seconds. And 16% increased stamina regen for 3 seconds. Be funny if they get shot by a bow in that moment and take extra damage in return, but oh well. I guess the 1.5 seconds grid is still worth it. Fortifying Sacred Ground. When Sacred Ground hits an ally for the first time, they can fortify, increasing armor by 16% for 5 seconds. I'm not sure if this first time condition was always a thing. Because it's not the entire duration of the Sacred, so that could be fun. Purity of Light. When Splash of Light removes a debuff from an ally, they healed for 16% of weapon damage every second for 3 seconds. Mending Protection. 18% outgoing healing power for 7 seconds if Orb of Protection heals an ally below 50% health. Accelerating Light's Embrace. Allies healed with Light's Embrace gain haste, increasing their movement speed by 20% for 5 seconds. Keep in mind there's also the other acceleration heal thing now. And Clean Beacon, when Beacon heals a player for the first time, they gain 12% critical chance critical damage for 5 seconds, which is actually pretty nice now. More relevant than before, I guess. Fire Staff. Crippling, refreshing gun. Crippling Pillar of Fire. Pillar of Fire inflicts slow on targets, reducing their movement speed by 20% for 4 seconds. Don't know if I like that. Don't know if I like CC on Fire Staff. Could combo well with the Flamethrower build as well then, so you just slow them with that. Oof. Alright, we'll see. But no more Refreshing Pillar, it's gonna hurt in some ways. Empowering Meteor Shower. When Meteor Shower hits, gain 3% of power for 5 seconds. Max 10 stacks. Empowering Fireball. Fireball impact deals 14% extra damage, additional 18% extra damage to targets above 50% health. Empowering Incinerate. Incinerate applies a stack of 60% fortify for 6 seconds for each target hit. Why is it called Empowering and then it's Fortify? Something's not fixed up here yet. Don't know which one's true. If it's Fortifying Incinerate now or if it's Empowering and that's an Empower. But, oh well. Accelerating Flamethrower. Using a Flamethrower against a target with 4 stacks of Smolder grants haste, increasing movement speed by 15% for 2 seconds. Burn from Flamethrower lasts 16% longer. Fortifying Burnout. Burnout deals 26% damage to targets with Burn. Sword and Shield. One of my favorites. See what we got here. Contagious Upheaval. Upheaval hits transfer 2 active debuffs from yourself to the target and deals 14% extra damage. Love to see that as usual. Compounding Whirling Blade. Whirling Blade deals 8% increased damage per successful hit against the target with a maximum of 6 stacks. Empowering Leaping Strike. All sword attacks deal 26% extra damage to target slowed by leaping strikes. Cowardly Punishment upgrade. Still weird that that's tied to an upgrade specifically. Don't know why that's never changed. Diminishing Shield Bash. Reduced non-consumable buff durations on enemies hit by Shield Bash by 22 to 44%. Fortifying Shield Rush. After hitting a target with Shield Rush, gain Fortify, increasing armor by 30% for 6 seconds. Accelerated Resolve. After triggering Defender's Resolve, increase movement speed by 16% and incoming healing by 22% for 5 seconds. So not too many crazy things on the sword. Great Axe. Refreshing Charge. Oh. Amazing. Charge can now pass through allies and enemies when sprinting forward, and will deal 14 to 28% increased base damage on the furthest damage threshold range. I love that. Finally, no more getting blocked by allies in the open world. Takes some getting used to, because you have to, like, you can't just intentionally have it hit a target and stop and bop, but rather you have to manually activate it every single time. But yeah, I like that change. That's interesting. Crippling Reap 2. Targets hit by Reap are inflicted with 30% slow for 5 seconds. Mending Execute. Heal for 50% of the damage dealt by Execute with a max of 1 trigger per ability use. Fortifying Whirlwind. Grants Fortify, increasing armor by 20% and slash damage by 10% for 2 seconds with a max of 5 stacks. Enfeebling Maelstrom. Still a weaken of 26% for 8 seconds. Insatiable Graphwell. Heal for 50% of the damage dealt by Graphwell. Limit on 1 target, and on hit, cast another 3-meter radius burst around you that deals 50% weapon damage. I'm not sure. Has this always been here? I feel like it wasn't, but... oh well. Ice Gauntlet. Unbroken Wind Chill. Wind Chill deals 40% damage. If Wind Chill hits the same target 6 times in a row, they become rooted for 1 second. Unending Storm. Ice Storm deals 40% damage. Frost effects remain on the enemies for 2 seconds after exiting Ice Storm. Empowered Spike. Ice Spikes deal 24% more damage to rooted foes and 60% more damage to slowed enemies. Deadly Shower. While Ice Showers, Frigid Showers upgrade is active, Frostbite deals 8% weapon damage per second to affected enemies. All Ice Gauntlet hits deal 16% increased damage to targets inflicted with this Frostbite effect. Pylon Burst. Pylons deal 14% more damage. Triggers a burst dealing 50% weapon damage to enemies within a 3-meter radius every 2 seconds. Healing Tomb. Heal for 30% of your base health after Entomb ends. Looks pretty similar-ish to what it was. Void Gauntlet. Voracious Blade. While below 50% health, Void Blade light attacks grant 16% lifesteal, and Void Blade heavy attacks grant 26% lifesteal. That is a lot lower than what it used to be. That is a heavy hit for the Leech Gang right here. I will actually look this one up because I want to know the exact value that it's going down by, because I feel like it was pretty much double that before. Previously, yes. Previously it was 44% on weapon and 28% on armor. So, ouch. I guess there are other ways to get leech now, though. You can just get leeching on your armor instead as a perk. That kind of offsets that quite a lot. So it's not the end of the world, I guess, but it does mean that other leech options can compete better with Voracious Blade. Nullifying Oblivion. When activated, Oblivion removes limited duration buffs from targets within its radius and increases the cooldown of limited duration debuffs on target by 15 to 30%. I will actually have to look this one up as well, because I think that's not how it used to work. No, yeah, it used to be cooldown reduction. Interesting. So we'll have to rely more on the crits for cooldown reduction, less Oblivion spam, but then the duration increase on debuffs. Painful. Yeah, we'll see what that means. Could be very strong in another way now. Could also weaken the overall playstyle. Putrefying Scream inflicts disease on hit, reducing the target's incoming healing by 40% and outgoing healing by 20% for 8 seconds. Diminishing Orb Decay reduces the base duration of the target's non-consumable buffs by 40% on hit. Crippling Tether, Baleful Tether, inflicts a slow on hit, reducing the target's movement speed by 34% for 5 seconds. If this perk is on a weapon, Baleful Tether will inflict Disintegrate on application. Sundering Essence, Essence Rupture will now inflict Rend, reducing the target's armor by 16% for 5 seconds. Greatsword. Relentless Freedom. Activating Relentless Rush removes root and slows, increase the critical hit chance by 20%. Again, I still don't think it's going to be that great on a Greatsword because the base scaling is still pretty low. Unless they change the crit scaling, we'll see about that. Legion Crosscut. Each hit of Crosscut gets, 12, then 22, then 36 life steal respectively. Oh, so it's... Okay. So it scales up with the hits now. Interesting. Skyward Nullification. Hitting a target with Skyward Slash now removes one of their buffs. Reduce remaining buffs by 40%. Only affects non-consumables. Energizing Counter. When a Calamity Counter is activated, immediately gain 50 stamina. Surprised I didn't have that. And each hit of counter will grant a stack of 10% energized for 3 seconds. Oh, okay. So up to 30% energized. And usually when you're getting hit, when you're using counter... Oh, yeah, okay. Don't know how often you actually get the stacks, but anyway. Not bad. Steadfast Purification. Each attack of Steadfast Strike reduces your debuff durations by 60%. Max 1 reduction per attack. But, Wait. Hold on. Am I lost? Oh, it is. No, yeah, okay. I'm not sure what this means because previously the values were 26 to 68%, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, I guess it matters if you just hit one hit off. Because, like, it's still over 100%, so it still should just cleanse your debuffs. So I'm a bit confused about that on weapon. And then on armor, it's actually better. But I feel like you almost always hit both hits. I think this is nice. Like 60% by having it on armor, that should be pretty good. Crippling Rupture, slow enemies struck with Roaring Rupture by 36% for 5 seconds. Blunderbuss. Exhaustive Net Shot 2. Net Shot inflicts exhaust, reducing target stamina regeneration by up to 40% for 4 seconds. I've been feeling this like being less impactful than it used to, despite still being a potent perk, but like, yeah. It's not feeling quite as great to me at the moment. Leeching Shrapnel Blast healed for 36% of the damage dealt by Aether's Shrapnel Blast. Venturing Claw Shot. When Claw Shot connects to an enemy at least 8 meters away, gain a 40% in power for 3 seconds or until the next hit. Plagued Splitting Grenade. Splitting Grenades inflicts a disease, reducing the healing efficiency on target by 24% and outgoing healing by 12% for 8 seconds. Resupplying Mortar Charge. Mortar Charge kills a reload 1 additional canister. Max 1 reload per shot will not trigger after final shot. Hits from Mortar Charge grant a stack of 8% in power for 6 seconds. Kinda curious about this perk now in context with the new extra damage perk that makes it a one-shot thing with 130% damage, because that would like reload it as well. But I still think like on-kill perks are meh, depending. But like for PvE, this could be really nice. Crippling Blast Shot. Targets hit by Blast Shot are slowed, reducing movement speed by 36% for 5 seconds. Flail. One of my favorites. Really been enjoying that again lately. Burdening Smite. Smite penetrates 16% of the target's armor, PvP only. Smite against players extend their active cooldowns by up to 20%. Mending Vortex. Every 2 hits of Vortex will heal you for 36% of the weapon damage. Something has Slayer script functionality. Not sure. That seems like a bug. Powerful Eruption. Eruption deals 16% increased damage per stack of impairment on the target. Is that how it works currently? I haven't really used Eruption enough, but it is pretty good now. Oh, it's 6.2% or 10% on weapon. So yeah, no, this is quite a significant increase. Keep this in mind, eruption players. This is possibly very nice, especially like people are running the trip eruption commoner. You need to see how many stacks of impairment you can get on them beforehand, but yeah, I mean, even just one, even a 16% increase, you have to have it on weapon, I guess, but yeah, it could be interesting. Accelerating barrage. After hitting a target with barrage, a main attack gain 24% haste for 6 seconds. Thwarting trip. If trip's first attack hits a target with active grid, the attack deals 60% more base damage. And again, that's just the first hit, which doesn't do that much damage, so even with the 60% value, not that crazy. Crowded bludgeon. If 2 or more targets are hit with warding bludgeon, even when the hits are blocked, gain 20% in power for 6 seconds. Fixed perks. What was considered the old standard perks. So this is just any perk that is not socketable. Plagued crits. Critical strikes against targets inflict disease for 6 seconds, reducing heal effects on the attack by 25%. Oh. Okay, 25%, outgoing heal by 12%. Let me double check that, because this is a weapon specific one, so keep that in mind. Okay, no, it's pretty much the same. It's 27% at the moment. So, yeah, okay. Plague crits kind of staying the same. Plague strikes. Heavy attacks against targets inflict disease for 8 seconds, reducing heal effectiveness on the target by 25% and outgoing heal by 12.5%. Critical strike should be a lot easier to achieve now, by the way, with a lot of builds. Not that it was ever hard. Thwarting counter. Deal 15% additional damage against targets with active grid. Thwarting strikes. Deal 6.5 additional damage while you have active grid. Thwarting counter, by the way, could be really interesting again in Bruiser Clumps now, because there's so much grid with the new items potentially. Transient strikes. Heavy attacks deal 15% additional damage. Transient crits. Heavy attacks deal 20% additional crit damage. Transient rend. Heavy attacks apply rend for 7 seconds. I mean, this is weird. I feel like I'm sorry, but at this point you would still be running transient strikes. It just seems like a no-brainer. Well, transient rend applies rend for 7 seconds, up to 20% 7 second cooldown. So you can spam this on cooldown with a single character. Transient recovery. Heavy attacks. Here's a player for 20% of the damage dealt. Various shirking that all have the same thing. Oh, we have a shirking shock here too. So, if a hit is avoided by dodging, your next attack will deal an additional 20, 40, 30% weapon damage as whatever element you are choosing. Not hating that. And then we have attunements, and we do have a lightning attunement now. Okay, we have all the attunement, every element. We have lightning again, we have everything. Successful hits deal additional 14% weapon damage as element. The 1.5 seconds cooldown. I think at those values I'd probably prefer attunement. Depending. Probably. Alright, disdain infliction too, we've already seen that. That's actually nerfed because the potency of outgoing damage over time effects is increased by 15%, and hitting a target with an active dot will extend the duration of the applied dot by 5%, but no more PvE 5% extra damage. Big loss for disdained builds. Penetrating the empowered? Penetrating empowered? Did they take away the V? PvP only. Critical hits against empowered players will have 10% armor penetration and reduce the duration of empowers on them by 7%. Again, can probably stack this with the other pen perk. It's like 50% at the point. I think it was 40% on the other one. Desperate Empower. 12% damage and 7% haste while exhausted. I guess you can just stack all the exhausted stuff now and just exhaust itself on purpose constantly. I don't know. Just get all the lifesteal and everything. Would be hilarious if that's the playstyle. That's not what you can opt going into. Sundering stacks. Once every 0.5 seconds, inflict a stack of 4% rent. Each lasting 6 seconds. Hold on. I need to check this one because... Isn't it less right now? No, sorry. It's not. It's the same. Yeah, okay. Still usable for PvE at least. PvP depending on weapon. Fractured Rend. But it's not as strong as some people think, by the way. Fractured Rend. When block breaking a player, inflict rend 18% for 6 seconds. Still not nearly enough in my opinion. Purifying crits, critical hits remove 1 buff from the target. 3-second cooldown. Hopefully, I need to test it again. Hopefully it actually works properly now all the time. Exhausted exploitation. Hits against exhausted targets inflict slow, reducing movement speed by 15% for 4 seconds. Backstab against exhausted targets reduce stamina regen by 13% for 4 seconds. Alacrity's punishment deal 16% additional damage to players with haste, still quite strong. Savior, healing is increased by 15% when you heal a target below 50% health. Purifying Breeze, heal for 20% of weapon damage every time you remove a debuff from an ally. Desperate Prayer, when you are below 50% mana, your healing is increased by 15%. Resurgence, kills and group kills grant stacks of Blessed, increasing outgoing healing by 1% per stack for 20 seconds. Personal kills grant 2 stacks, AI kills grant 1 stack, max 15 stacks. Okay. Critical Suppression, hitting a target with an attack from a magical weapon, light attack or heavy attack will reduce their critical chance by 2.5% for 3 seconds, stacks 4 times. Odd one. Not sure how to feel about that. Not sure if that's actually good. Depends on how good crit will be. End. 6% ability damage and 12% base damage increase to the final attack and a melee attack chain. Well, I'm assuming the 6% ability base damage is independent of that. So you just always have that. Very good. Very strong. Okay. I don't know if you want to bank on the final attack of the melee attack chain though, so much though. Yeah, not sure if that's going to be good. It's a bit of an odd one. Sturdy. You take 10% less stamina damage while blocking. Sturdy, good old Sturdy. Sure footing. You move 30% faster by blocking, and push and pull distances are reduced by 20%. And Hatred, you generate 250 more threat and deal 7% more base damage to taunted foes. Wait, yeah, okay. That's pretty nice. And then Life Stealing, 5.5% of your damage as health. I guess you can add that on top of the leech perks, but the leech perks on armor seem like more effective because they just take armor slots. Keen Speed. On crit, you gain 15% haste for 3 seconds with a cooldown of 3 seconds. Okay. That's a lot of sticking power right there again. It has been switched around so many times I don't even know anymore. Keen Speed is like... They will never find the true answer to what Keen Speed is, I guess. But yeah, okay. That I don't hate that, so you can't just have a lingering haste, but you can just reapply it quickly. But then you have to crit every time as well, so that's a significant downside. Moral Aggression, hits grant 2% lifesteal, gain 10% of your max health, 10 stamina, and 12% fortify, and 10% empower for 8 seconds on kill. That's a lot going on there, with a 2 seconds cooldown. Should be very nice for PvE. Can also be on armor, highest value obtainable only in weapons. Okay, so this is both. Interesting. Sturdy Fortification. Blocking a player's attacks. It's a stack of 8% fortify for you 7 seconds with a max of 3 stacks. So that is still 24 solid fortify. 24%. Healing Defense. On block, heal for 2.5% of your base health. Interesting to see that moved as a general perk. Is this not a... Well, it doesn't specify. It might just be on shield, actually. Shield Retaliation on block. Gain a 12% power for 4 seconds. Yep. And then we have Shield Aggression. 4% base damage. And this is interesting that these perks are just in there now. Like, can they just roll? Can you just get any on any type of shield? Can I just get... Yeah, Refreshing Defense as well. 4% cooldown reduction. And shield Defense. 4% damage reduction. Well, we'll see if you can actually roll every single one on every shield. That would be kind of funny. But then shield's also here again, so this is extra weird. So armor and shield. So I'm not sure what's going on with the shield. It's confusing. Flame Conditioning. 5% damage absorption for 5 seconds after taking fire damage. Each item with this perk stacked. This is all interesting, right? These conditionings. I think they're all slightly nerfed. I think they used to be 6%. And on top of that, it's also like interacting with the gem changes. Wait, no, they were actually 5% before. Okay. Okay, so they're not actually changed. But with the gem changes, you might need conditioning again. Or you might need it more. We don't actually know what is happening to elemental gems yet. We'll see. But if they work like Opal and Onyx, then all of this becomes relevant again. We'll find out. Armor perks. Now, these are now exclusive for armor, I'm guessing. Shocking Fortification gives you 9% fortify for 6 seconds. Each piece of armor increases the potency of this effect. Thorny Reflection, taking a critical hit, gives reflects back 8% of your weapon damage, reducing the attacker's crit chance by 10% for 3 seconds. With 1 second cooldown. Again, might be relevant now. Critical Retribution, again, a 10% crit chance for 7 seconds when taking a critical hit with a 10-second cooldown. Maybe this perk will actually be more interesting if crit gets better. Sturdy Energy, when blocking a hit while below 30% stamina, gain 25% stamina regeneration for 5 seconds. 10-second cooldown effect is removed when players are exhausted. Vital Synergy, while health is below 50%, gain 15% stamina regen, and while stamina is below 50%, incoming healing is increased by 15%. Still a very strong perk. Empowering Breaker, when attack is blocked, gain a stack of Empower, increasing damage by 4.5% for 5 seconds with a max of 5 stacks. Shocking Energy, if a hit is avoided by dodging while in light or medium equip load, gain 16 stamina with a 6-second cooldown. Hardcore Parkour, gain 15% haste for 5 seconds after triggering a traversal action. Breaker Bypass, when an attack is blocked, gain a stack of 4% stamina damage increase for 4 seconds. That seems pretty low, to be honest. But 10 stacks, okay. 40%, quite nice. Purifying Switch, hitting a target with an ability for 10 seconds of swapping a weapon will cleanse 1 debuff. Oh, you can kind of do that. Yeah. Yeah, that, and then the Purifying Pot, it'll allow you to cleanse quite a lot. Prolonged Favor, increase the duration of limited duration buffs on self by 10%. Quick Revive, gain... Oh, that's actually interesting, because it's just all buffs. All self buffs that are... It's a bit better than just increasing your Empower or something. You just increase your Fortify and everything. Don't know if it's just one time. A lot of these are just one-time perks, so it might not be a stackable one either. Quick Revive, gain Grit while reviving. Reduce the time required to revive down players or revive by 40%. Okay, I guess. For the rezzers out there. Lifestealers Drought, all hits gain 15% lifesteal, and the power of lifesteals is increased by 15% as long as you have not used a survival potion in the last 13 seconds. Interesting, okay. 15% lifesteal as long as you're not potting. Allows for very aggressive playstyles. I like that. This is cool. Sacrificial Empowerment, increase base damage by 1.5%, but armor is decreased by 1%. Stacks per armor this is slotted in, so this is same idea as that new set, I guess. Oh, yeah, not sure what that means. Freeing Aggression, hitting a target will reduce the duration of active crowd control status effect on self by, well, almost 4%, with a 1-second cooldown. Okay, that's weird. Hitting a target, not sure what to make of that. That seems very weak compared to just having like a freedom type perk. Yeah, I guess. We'll see. Terminal Vengeance, gain 5% increased base damage for every 25% of your max health you are missing. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty good. I think. I mean, yeah. Like 15% damage increase if you're below 25%. And then you get some lifesteal from your lifesteal's Drought. That could be good. Trinkets. Alright. I think these were all nerfed by like 5%. Amulets and shields. This is all the protection perks. They all have a damage reduction of 10%. Now we take 10% less damage. On amulets specifically, we have well-being 2. So this is new health, I guess. I didn't know this was still a perk. I thought that was just the amulet perk now, but well, I'm not sure. Anyways, increase max health by 5%. Stamina recovery. When you hit well below 50%, gain 40 stamina, 60 seconds cooldown. Purify. When you hit well below 50% health, lose all debuffs with a 90 seconds cooldown. I still don't understand the contrast and like why one of these is like less common than the other. Fortified recovery. When you hit well below 50%, gain 7 seconds of 30%. Fortify. In my opinion, weaker than Purify. Shirking cleanse after dodging an attack in light or medium equipped loot. Lose 2 dots of debilitate debuffs with a 6-second cooldown. That's kind of better. Light or medium and 2 dots or debuffs. Okay. Shirking and power. PvP only after successfully dodging an attack. So generally there's like a lot of cleanses. Weapon swap cleanse, pod cleanse, any kind of pod. And shirking cleanse, so that's options. Shirking and power, after successfully dodging an attack, gain a stack of empower, increasing damage by 10% per stack for 7 seconds with a max of 3 stacks. Stop, drop, and roll. Dodging will reduce the current duration of all burn damage over time effects on you by 20%. Unimpeded. Potency of all slows on you are reduced by 30% as long as you have not been exhausted within the last 10 seconds. Enchanted Resilience. And you reduce the attacker's basic attack damage dealt to you by 10%, but increase attacker's ability damage dealt to you by 5%. I think this could be worth it in quite a few situations. Potentially. I see potential for this. Skilled Resilience, sorry. Reduce attacker's ability damage dealt to you by 5%, but increase attacker's basic attack damage to you dealt to you by 10%. Is it really? I mean, yeah, I guess. I mean, I'm thinking, I thought the damage split between basic attacks and abilities was a bit more even than that, but I guess they have internal numbers on that. I wish we could have those numbers. I wonder what like damage over time, like if that's factored as an ability damage as well or not. That would make a very big difference in favor of the second option, but it's a trade-off anyway. Well, we'll have to see. I mean, I might just yeah, lots to think about here. Alright, we have a 10% general base damage increase on rings, but the damage perks also still exist on top of that. So we're still getting 8% damage from that. I didn't know that. Additionally, Healing Breeze. When applying a healing effect to target, heal the target for 15% weapon damage for 6 seconds, 10 seconds cooldown per target, potency of heal reduced by 35% if applied to self. Didn't think this would stay in the game. The fact that you can proc that with a single piece of shirking makes me think it's too strong. I always thought this should just be tied to focus somehow, but I guess they want it to be a perk, so I guess it'll stay a perk. Purifying Mend. When you remove a debuff from an ally, heal for 20% weapon damage. Purifying Heart. On Heart, lose all debuffs. Model Empowerment. Player kills grant 2% damage bonus that lasts for 2 minutes until death or game mode transition. Maximum is 10 stacks, cannot be cleansed, does not trigger off of persistent dots. Invigorated Punishment. PvP only. Abilities deal 1.3% bonus damage per buff on a player, maximum of 10 buffs. Cursed Enchantment. Increase basic attack damage dealt by 10%, but decrease ability damage dealt by 10%. Interesting. If you're doing like a, I mean, should I say it again? Crescent Wave build. If you're not using abilities. And the other option exists as well. Cursed Skill. Increase ability damage dealt by 10%, but decrease the basic attack damage dealt by 10%. Interesting that these are both applying 10%, but then the reductions are different between the two. Keen Switch on weapon swap. Increase crit chance by 9% for 3 seconds until next hit. That sounds terrible. Unless you're just constantly swapping weapons. Enchanted Totality. All hits deal 2% increased base damage. Enchanted Skills. Abilities deal 2.5% increased base damage. So you just add another 2% base damage with all hits. Sounds way better. Charge attacks, light and heavy attacks gain 3% increased base damage. So again, depends on the build, I guess. Critical infliction, gain 7% increased crit chance against targets with your damage over time effects active. That's spicy. For even more crit. That's quite a lot of crit. And Rune Glass should be enough. Hitting a target inflicted by one of your damage abilities or damage over time effects will reduce the duration of dots on self by 5% with a 1 second cooldown. Kinda cool, kinda not enough reduction for me to think this is worth it. Mortal Strike, killing enemy will cause your next ability within 20 seconds to deal 22% more damage. Okay, that's just for one hit. Rogue Alacrity, backstabbing a target with an active haste. Remove one of the haste and grant you 12% haste for 4 seconds. That is so toxic. That haste is dispelled if you receive a critical hit. They're really doubling down on the backstab stuff. That is some dagger preparation right there. It really is. Unscathed Empowerment. Melee light attacks grant 1 stack and melee heavy attacks grant 2 stacks of 5% empower for 8 seconds. With a maximum of 6 stacks. Wow. For every hit you deal without taking damage. Taking a hit will remove the empower and increase that instance of damage by 15%. Ooh, that's risky. Okay, that could really fry you in certain boss situations. If you get hit hard enough by the wrong attack, then this could be a lot of damage, could be a big problem. So, yeah, bit spicy. Earrings. Refreshment. Oh, it does mention it. Okay, so maybe this damage perk is just general. Maybe this like first perk is just a general perk, the well-being. But they said that it was just a general damage increase on rings. I didn't think it was like specific like this, so I don't know how that's gonna work. But the fact that they're putting refreshment. Oh wait, no, maybe refreshment is a No, sorry, refreshment is a separate perk, so it's on top of the other perk. So it is actually a perk that you can roll. Okay. Refreshment reduces max cooldowns by 10%. This is instead of all your existing refreshing, basically. Refreshing moves. Light attacks reduce cooldown by 1%, and heavy attacks reduce cooldowns by 2% with an 0.2 seconds cooldown. I mean, there are situations where you prefer ref move in PvE, I believe. Certain builds that use enough basic attacks. Generally, I think I would value refreshment more in most builds, especially for PvP, where taking, like, connecting 10 light attacks usually takes quite a while. So, depends, but I think my preference would be refreshment. Refreshing recovery. When your health drops below 50%, all of your active cooldowns are reset. Still not a fan of that one, to be honest. Feels weird. But 60-second cooldown, it's not too bad. On earring, anyway, so why not? Regeneration, 0.6% of your health every second. Yeah. Nimble, 12% stam regenerate. Hold on, is that the current value, or is that more? Or is it less even? It's 1% more, okay, well. Always a difficult one, but we'll see. It doesn't change the wind up, that's the problem. Despised. You generate 250 more threat and deal 7% more base damage to taunted foes. I feel like there was another perk before that was also doing the same thing. Not on earrings. Refreshing Toast 2. Potion cooldowns are 10% faster. Okay. Empowering Toast 2. Gain 12% empower for 8 seconds. Fortifying Toast. Gain 20% fortify for 8 seconds. I think, especially with the 8 second cooldown, I think double fortifying between that and crits giving you fortify, you can run a lot of fortify very easily. Healing hard on hard rune heal for 9% of your max health every second for 3 seconds. Beloved is back. Didn't think that would be a thing again. You generate, also makes me wonder what happens to Cornelians, but you generate 40% less threat with a maximum reduction of 99% from all sources and deal 10% more damage to taunted foes. Very mandatory in PvE. Okay. Interesting. I wonder if you can run both, Despised and Beloved, and just do even more damage. You just make your tank suffer and then you offset the rest with carnelians or something. Not sure if that's possible, but it'd be funny. But then you'd also have to watch out with taunts. Well, actually, no, it doesn't say anything about taunts. General, fix an issue where players could aim down sights and lock onto a target at the same time, making it look like any fired shots during that time were magically magnetized to the target, while really just neither a camera nor player were pointing towards the locked on target. Interesting, okay, didn't know about this. Fix an issue where the 300 focus attribute node would sometimes grant increased mana regen. Fix an issue where an input buffered attack or ability or attack could be used mid-air. Okay, that might mean you cannot use perforate mid-air anymore, which would kind of suck because mid-air perforate is kind of the only way to reliably land off 3 hits in the Brimstone arena, particularly. If someone drops down, you just hit them with the perforate in that moment. Alright, artifacts. We got a lot of scaling and effect changes here. Update the following artifacts to no longer use attribute conversion, but instead have their attributes overwritten. We've talked about this plenty before. Abyss and Inferno both have B tier scaling with int and strength now. So the 75% scaling with both, but again, the values are also adjusted, so it might actually be around the same damage. And Life Taker artifact overrides the default for int and dex B tier scaling instead. Vengeance, fix an issue where Vengeance functionality wasn't triggering off heavy attacks. Fix an issue where the stamina and mana regen rates were not applying to the listed rate in the tooltip. Crescent Wave updated the Greatsword to only trigger the heavy blade passive when melee heavies are triggered to prevent the Crescent Wave artifact from triggering it. Yeah, no, just looked at the tooltip again and I'm still not sure what that's supposed to mean. I am guessing this part just makes no sense. Well, of course the Crescent Wave artifact is going to trigger Crescent Wave. What? I'm guessing what it means is you use a heavy attack on a target and then the projectile shows, and if you just hit the air it doesn't fire projectile. That's my guess, but I don't know. Old Crown. Update the Old Crown effect to use 3 changeable gems now. Oh my god. That is... Okay. It's not fake gems, it's actually 3 changeable gems, which means it should give 3 rune glass slots, which means Old Crown should be a mandatory upgrade unless they have a specific restriction for rune glasses on this. But like, right out of the gate with the expansion, I feel like this is one of the best things to have in that case. If it stays that great later, who knows, but 3 rune glasses, yeah, okay. Alright, okay, that's strong. And then reduce the amount of attributes provided by Old Crown to compensate for the attribute adjustments. No one will actually care about those little extra attributes compared to the gems at that point, I think. Attuned leather pants reduce the amount of attributes provided by attuned leather pants to compensate for attribute adjustments. Same thing. Featherweight. Updated the featherweight artifact to have a trade-off that inflicts slows when staggered. 8% slow for 4 seconds. That's a difficult decision to make. Especially for like light melees where having a slow on you is such a big problem. I don't know what that means. I think in PvE it'll mostly be whatever. But in PvP, yeah, big question if that's still gonna be like that popular. Depends on the playstyle, I guess. Just don't get hit, I guess. Just dodge the stagger and you're fine. It is just stagger, so it's not that many. I don't know. I don't know. Also, what happens if you have grit? Does it not happen then? Tumbler Feed Reps. Updated Tumbler Feed Reps artifact values. Empower reduced from 15% to 10%. Fortify from 25% to 18%. That should still be pretty good, I think. But there might be others that are better in general now. Looking at Old Crown, maybe. Ankh. Updated the Ankh artifact values, increasing healing mod downside from 25 to 30%, and reducing healing mod benefit from 25% to 20%. Okay. I think Ankh needed a bit of an adjustment. How much of an impact this will have, how good this is, cannot say yet. Finisher. Updated the Finisher artifact to only trigger on bleeds applied by the wielder. Oh. Okay, that's a bit of a problem, I guess. Let me look into that real quick, because I need to have the... Yeah, so It's the 15% damage increase that applies only against targets affected by bleeds. But if you're running an evade rapier with flurry and a raid, the problem will be that your bleeds won't stay on all too long if you have a consistent flourish and finish player. So you are effectively losing that 15% damage bonus a lot more often, even though you will still apply bleeds. There might be workarounds though, because technically, I think this was specifically limited to rapier skills, but I'm not sure if it still is. I wonder what would happen if you had like Keenly Jagged, but at the same time, that also would override between multiple players, so on a raid might still not be ideal. I think this is a hit. I think this will effectively mean that that evade rapiers might have better options than finisher, which I think is good, because it's boring that everyone can just run finisher for everything rapier. So I actually welcome this change, and we'll just have to see what other pathways there are to get a very good rapier that doesn't rely on this. For the time being, people are still going to run finisher for a while because it's still good damage uptime, but you can get the same effect technically by running Inferno offhand and just running another rapier. You get a more consistent damage uptime on that now. So that's what I used to do actually, and if you have a better perked evade rapier, you can do it that way. You can also do it with a poison bow and everything. There's a few that have a damage increase that works in another way. Serenity, updated the Serenity artifact and power and fortify duration from 5 to 4. Sure, whatever. The Unmoved, updated the Unmoved artifact to reflect damage back to the attacker with 16% void damage with a 1-second cooldown. It doesn't even say reflect back when Unmoved is enabled, just in general. I think Unmoved has potential. I'm a big fan. Blood Drinker, adjust the Blood Drinker's downside from 25% to 20%. Oh, it's just a buff. And added a benefit of lesser decrease in damage if the target is diseased. Very cool. So you just apply disease to them and you get... Okay. I didn't know Blood Drinker needs a buff. That was a pretty good one already. Might be Blood Drinker meta. Quick Draw Gloves gives a bonus in power after the invulnerability ends. Yeah, okay. I don't know if you really want to run it in power. It's not usually what you need. I think they would have to have like a haste or something instead. Not that I want that thing to be stronger anyway. Runic Greaves give a bonus to haste while Hard Rune is fully charged while in combat. This is interesting as someone who like sits on a charged Hard Rune way too often. But like, I mean the effect itself, right, is activating a Hard Rune will grant 23% movement speed for 6 seconds, which is just not that crazy. But now, like, yeah, I guess it's like just more haste all around, so maybe that's what people are gonna run for the Schizo haste build now. Just run around with fully charged Hard Rune for a bit, be very fast, and then jump them, pop the Hard Rune, get the other haste, and then go back to farming up your Hard Rune. Could be interesting that way. Shrapnel switched from headshots to critical hits. Okay, that's better. It's not as limited. Gilly's Gravity Gauntlets increased the power of each charge and reduced max charges. That's nice. Beneficial. Otzi increased power from 10 to 20% for both the haste and damage. Wait a second. Is that... I keep confusing them. Otzi is the one... Oh, that's just the one that... when you break out on Tomb. So, not really relevant because I don't think anyone will ever actually use that effectively. Grace gives a bonus ability damage while haste from its active. I'd love to see the value on that because that sounds fun. I hope it's a good enough value to justify it. I'd really like to use an ability focused greatsword. I've been saying that for a long time that I'd much prefer that over the heavy spam that we have on 2 greatswords now. So yes, please. Hopefully it's like a good enough bonus to be like, this is actually worth it. Freya's Francisca gives a bonus functionality that gives 25% chain damage to nearby target when it triggers. Odo. Updated Odo's defense perk to be Odo's confidence and give it lifesteal. Bonus lifesteal if no shield is equipped. Interesting. That could be fun. We'll have to try that out. Dorgoth's Blade. Give it a bonus functionality to consume The burns and deal remaining damage once similar to finish. Okay, but how? Am I confused? So heavy melee attacks on both weapons cause 10% burning for 6 seconds. Max 3 stacks, but then how do you consume them? Is it just on first and finish? I mean, it's still, it revolves around heavy attacks, and that's the main problem. That's all I can say on it. Plague Herald. Increase the power of the disease you apply to yourself from 1 to 2%. I think the total you apply to an enemy is 30%. You apply 20% to yourself now. That's a pretty heavy penalty, but you can kind of build around it. You can kind of combine it with Blood Drinker, for example, because you got that leech and everything going on. Which then also gets that extra bonus because you're playing a disease. So I think Plague Herald. Plague Herald will have its place. It'll be fine. Heart Runes. Update the Grasping Vines tooltip. That's just mentioning its grid benefit. Life Staff fixed an issue. The card's Lies Embrace to receive additional healing while healing targets in Sacred Ground. Okay, interesting. We got some modifier changes. Great Axe. Increase the Great Axe crit damage multiplier from 1.3 to 1.35. Interesting. Great Axe has a lot of crit perks, and with all these other changes coming into crit damage, there could be something here. Greatsword is not getting that, but increased base damage from 75 to 77, which when you look at bigger numbers, it always has a little bit of a bigger impact when you add all the multipliers and stuff to it. Don't know how much of impact completely, but same with Warhammer. Increase the base damage from 90 to 93. No crazy increase, but it could be something. With the bow, we get a very minimal increase by 1, and then increased crit chance from 7 to 8%. But the bow will also benefit from the new attribute scaling, because at the moment, according to the tooltips, it is one of the few weapons scaling S tier. Ice Gauntlet, Quick Frost status effect description is updated because the haste value was incorrect. Rapier, fix the Allegro's tooltip to reflect the current buff value. And Musket, increase the musket base damage by 1 as well, to 98, and the crit chance by 1% from 6 to 7. Fix an issue with the musket trap ability doing less damage than intended. Fire Staff, increased how much the Fire Staff base damage is reduced in PvP from 13 to 15%, also relatively minor reduction. I don't know. I feel like Fire Staff is not as busted as it used to be, but it still has its like annoyance points in PvP where I could see that a 2% reduction might be just the tweak it needs. But we'll also see. Again, it's going to be an S tier scaling weapon, so it's getting a buff in another way compared to some other weapons. Void Gauntlet, corrected Void Gauntlet's Void Blade ability, double visual effects. Ice Gauntlet, fixed Quick Frost move speed value inconsistency with status effect tooltip. Game modes. We've got a lot more here. We've got Tower of Calomel and the hourly rotation of OPR. We've got 3 Outpost Rush maps now. AFK timer for wars is 30 minutes now, so you can go into the war before and you don't have to constantly walk around. Very nice. Items from the hotbar can no longer be added to the Outpost Rush storage shed. Okay, CTF Frozen Pass fixed an issue that allowed players to climb up the spawning area. Classic. AI updated the reaction limiter system, allowing stunning attacks to always cause a reaction and stun gold nameplate elite enemies, even when the limiter is active. Interesting. This does not apply to actual boss characters. Expeditions, Hive of the Gorgons, Trial of the Devourer, and Mutated Expeditions have been updated to level 75. No surprise here. Fixed an issue when Hive of the Gorgons, where the door of the infection room would not open. Graying out of player health bars should now be consistent across all expeditions. Progression and economy. This is going to be some money makers. Deprecated attribute perk items, timeless shards, and all recipes that relied on them to select attributes when crafting, as attributes have been removed from gear. And apparently they will just be nuked and we're not getting any compensation. Removed 725 gear score artifact upgrade recipes, as you can now upgrade these items from 700 gear score. Again, the 700 gear score upgrade still exists to unlock the last perk. Fixed an issue with star metal chisels cost in the Syndicate faction shop. Fixed a rare issue where cooking ingredient stacks would visually show as infinite after leaving a game of Capture the Flag. Halloween boss now has dynamic scaling based on the number of enemies around, players around it. As a consequence, the base health has been increased 33% to accommodate the change. Very nice, we like dynamic scaling like that. Loot drop from players are less likely to be stuck in the air. Fix an issue that players can keep target locking the blinded greenskeeper while she's using the burrow attack. Fixed inactive dye channels on multiple armor sets, including Madly Fair Sun Robes set. Okay. Mounts. Fixed mount fade in transition. Before, certain mounts would appear abruptly instead of fading in, or fail and remain invisible. Seasons. Fix an issue where several world bosses would not properly advancing the most dangerous game 1 to 3 and Master of the Hunt. Social. Added a Nighthaven territory control, which is a maximum 15% payout. In return, Eden is reduced to 10%, Brimstone is reduced to 5%, Brightwood is reduced to 5%, and Morningdale is reduced to 5%. So Nighthaven will be highly contested. Fix an issue where a territory-owning company disbanding would result in a bugged territory state. Fix an issue where causing the table in the table flip amount to shake around. Okay. UI/UX. Fixed pinned objectives not displaying hand object blah blah. Fixed improved damage taken visual effect visibility. Oh, hopefully that's good. Fixed UI scaling issues for various elements. There are also some known issues. Multiple mounts are showing as obtainable from the store, but you can't actually buy them. Foxy is going to be from the Season Pass. Chloros is going to be from the Isle of Night, and Moonlight is going to be from the Isle of Night. The Catacombs deserter penalty of 5 minutes does not disable the play button when accessing Catacombs from the world entrance. However, players will still not be able to enter the new Catacomb until the penalty has expired. And the PvP reward track item, Bundle of Umbral Crystals, actually pretty relevant here, says it's 500 Umbral Crystals, but it's actually 400 Umbral Crystals, which is still quite a lot, so PvP track for Umbral Crystals could be a good path, apparently, if that drops often enough. All the changes we have for now, we made it through. If you appreciate the effort, consider subscribing, click the bell. If you'd like to support me further and get early trading tips, you can do so on Patreon. Thanks to all of my patrons who do that already. This was the first rundown of everything, my first impression of everything. I will make a more condensed version with the most crucial changes and various other variants in the future. We'll also talk about the Season Pass in a separate video. This is almost 2 hours long at this point. No, actually we hit 2 hours. So I'm going to take a break. I'm going to catch my breath and I will work on that later. For now, thank you very much for watching and I hope to see you for the next one soon. Duke Sloth, out.